Hello and welcome to this video review of MotoGP 19, the latest in a long line of officially licensed motorbike racing sims from developer Milestone. I've been playing both the PS4 version on a standard retail PS4 and also the Xbox One version on a retail Xbox One X. Now there's very little difference between these versions despite Xbox One X's significantly more powerful chipset. Both versions run at 30 frames per second and neither suffer from slowdown whatsoever. Before we go any further, for anyone who watched my preview videos on the unfinished development build, I'm very happy to report that the difficulty bugs there have indeed been fixed. I can now keep up with other bikes on the straights, the bike itself seems to naturally rev higher, and the tyres no longer spawn in cold on the challenges. However, something that was present in the development build was tyres overheating too quickly, particularly the soft compound. Sadly, I gotta say that has carried over into the game. After a couple of laps, you'll find your bike squirming all over the place on normal physics settings, which gets harder and harder to control as time goes on. If you fit hard tyres to your bike, this problem is almost completely alleviated, so I'm afraid I can only recommend you fit hard tyres in every session, unless it's raining of course. Speaking of rain, the wet weather effects look decent but unspectacular, and the wet surface of the track doesn't seem to affect the handling compared to the dry track as much as you might expect. Disappointingly too, while it's possible to race in dry weather but on a still wet track, there's no dynamic weather, so the track never actually dries out, even when you've been going around it for almost an hour. If you're wondering what that weird howling bike is, well, that's a Moto E bike, the brand new for 2019 zero emissions superbike. It's the Moto E Series inaugural championship this year in real life, and you can take part in the same 7-race series here on your console. Once you get used to the frankly awful high-pitched whine, they actually play just fine, with smooth acceleration in their one forward gear and normal braking. However, I must admit, I find the braking in general the least satisfying part of MotoGP 19's game engine. The simulation is probably perfectly realistic, but slowing down feels massively cumbersome even on normal physics, and if you miss your braking point by a few feet, there's simply no way you're going to stop in time for the corner. To make matters worse, locking your brakes requires a second or so to recover your balance before you turn, which either sees you falling as you try to stay on the racing line, or again overshooting. Yet more woes come when you choose manual gears. Now, I've played a lot of MotoGP games, but I've never seen such a kick when you change from second gear to first while turning. It's so bad that it will almost certainly throw you straight off the bike on the MotoGP bikes. Third gear to second still has a bit of a twitch, but you're actually better off avoiding first gear altogether unless you plan to do all your braking before the turn. It seems mega harsh. Once you get the hang of the handling though, the game is a challenging, moderately enjoyable experience, but it's never spectacular. Everything feels a little bit lackluster, from the races that don't have either music or commentary to the static spectators filling the stands. There's just very little life, leaving the game with a distinct lack of soul, and when you're competing in a challenge that only features one AI rider, or you're way out in front in a long race, it can feel like a very lonely experience. There is an online mode of course, which I can't show you yet as the game wasn't out when I recorded this footage, so there was nobody to race against. But it's the series' third year in esports, and there's been much more made of the party system and the director mode, but that'll all be for another video. Aside from Moto E, the biggest new feature in this game is the revamped artificial intelligence system that powers the computer-controlled riders. Supposedly, these are not scripted bots, but rather individuals that make their own decisions based on what they see rather than react to unseen situational changes. That's what I was told by the game's producer in person. But to be blunt, I can't tell the difference myself. I mean, these riders may be a little more fallible and definitely more aggressive than before, banging into the back of my bike without warning, but they also move in unison sometimes for no obvious reason. Now if that's not traditional scripting, reacting to something unseen en masse, then I don't know what is. This year's game does feel a little less clumsy than last year's in the bike handling, but it's just not as playable as the games that ran on Milestone's old bespoke engine. And I gotta say, 30 frames per second on Xbox One X just isn't good enough, and I hope they do patch in the performance mode they mentioned they would like to include, which they told me about at the preview event. There is the usual rewind feature, which I personally recommend you switch off immediately, as it's just too easy to start relying on it. as well as the usual photo mode and replays after the race. This year you can also modify your rider's helmet, number and butt sticker decals, and the menus have nice illustrations of the riders featured in the Historic Challenges mode. This mode is definitely challenging, but I'd say it's less fun than career mode. Career mode really is where it's at. Speaking of which, the career mode has a pro career option if you really want the no stabilizers real deal MotoGP experience. It is crushingly difficult when the assists are severely limited, but it is still possible to fulfill the development criteria in the practice sessions if you try hard enough, and that unlocks development points for your team to develop the bike through the course of the season, which is all great. These development tasks also act as a tutorial for each track, just like they do in Codemasters Formula 1 games, teaching you the ideal trajectory before switching the line off for the real deal. Now you can start your career in either the Red Bull Rookies Cup or one of the 3 Moto categories, leading you towards the ultimate goal of MotoGP. Or of course, you can just start there if you want to. And if you choose the standard career rather than the pro one, you can do all of this with shorter races, easier opponents, and whichever riding assists you feel you need to make your game more fun. There's no questioning the commendable use of the MotoGP license itself, and the TV-style presentation in the pits and before and after the races does look better than last year. In career mode or a more straightforward championship season, you can choose which sessions you want to participate in, and your friendly neighbourhood spanner man is on hand to fix your handling problems with a few simple questions, which is very cool, especially if you know that the bike's not handling correctly, but you can't say exactly why that is. The sound is good, though some bikes do drill into your brain with their droning, especially Moto 3. And the music is better than Milestone's recent offerings, which have all been steadily getting better sonically, I have noticed, as I'm sure you have too. And the presentation overall feels much more deluxe and sure of itself. It is a very slick package. If only the same could be said on the track. It still feels like the change to Unreal Engine 4 has pushed the series backwards, and all the hard work is going into that, rather than making it actually more fun to play. It's also a very familiar experience, and definitely not one that will appeal to casuals. Now, in reviews like this, there's usually a line that says something like, well, it's difficult on sim settings, but there's the usual stability assists to make sure anyone can play it. But, well, here's footage of a 10-year-old having a go with the brake assistance and auto gears on. Yep, that went well. And here's my girlfriend playing it, with those settings enabled as well, but also the dynamic trajectory line. Look, none of it helps. You need to know how to control the bike to have any fun at all, besides wincing and saying, yep, that's gonna sting in the morning. And that means taking the game very seriously. Now I know MotoGP fans do take their game very seriously, but surely even they must be tiring of buying what is essentially the same game yet again. Or rather, the same game, but at half the frame rate it used to be. In isolation, this is a decent but unspectacular bike sim that dutifully reproduces the MotoGP world in strong detail. Its career mode replicates every facet of the real sport, but the game just isn't anywhere near the quality of the four-wheeled competition in the genre. I give the game a respectable 3 stars out of 5. Check out my channel for more MotoGP videos, including one of the new Moto E races, and subscribe for more gaming videos, music and more. Many thanks for watching, take care until next time. Cheers.